Real people, real opinions, Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.
Over the weekend, on a very serious note, the French ambassador encouraged Ireland to consider small nuclear reactors as part of its energy mix for the future. Speaking to the Business Post, Vincent Guerrand said he supports nuclear or newer nuclear technologies being used to allow smaller reactors to be set up. And of course, the anti-nuclear movement have rejected calls for modular reactors to be built here in Ireland. But is there an argument for nuclear energy in Ireland? Joining me on the line, because I know nothing about nuclear energy, first of all, I'm going to be speaking to Donegal Independent Councillor Michael McClafferty, who obviously was objecting to the idea of nuclear power in Ireland. And also, Matthew Donoghue is from the group 18 for Zero, which is a group that is starting a national conversation about the potential for nuclear energy in Ireland. Good evening, gentlemen, to you both. And thank you very much indeed for coming on the show tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let me first go to Councillor Michael McClafferty. Councillor, you heard the French ambassador talking about encouraging Ireland to get into nuclear power. France is littered with nuclear power stations. It's cheap, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. It's free. Well, it's when I say it's free, I mean, we obviously get the raw materials from the ground. And, you know, the waste, there is a fear factor from people. But if we look back through history, you know, a lot of people died in coal mines as well. You know, so we could realistically say it's probably equally as safe as any other form of power. So what's the main objection, do you think, Michael?
I don't totally agree with as equally as friendly as any other source of power, to be quite honest with you. At the end of the day, while I welcome the fact that a national conversation has been looked for there, and hopefully that'll become apparent over time, that is needed, of course. But I do feel in Ireland here would be sitting very vulnerable going down this road, to be quite honest with you, and I don't think we're just there yet or in a position to be going down the road of getting this, even having the thought of having it done. Fair enough talking about it, but if you look at Chernobyl and Fukushima and those kind of places, things didn't go that well there and still haven't. And look at the disasters caused, natural disasters, health problems, everything else. We are very close here in Ireland, the way we are, obviously the UK, Scotland, Sellafield and so on. We're 100 mile across or so there at our nearest point. For example, the leaks in Sellafield back in the day, it has caused problems. I just think we're a very small island, to be quite honest with you, to be getting into something this major at this moment in time anyway. Certainly not at the moment until more constellation will be had and we see clearly where we'll be going. I think we have enough on our plate at the moment, to be fair. We can't deal with the situation we have.
But would this not be a way? Would this not be a way out of the situation? We all know no matter what your theories on climate change happen to be, we do know that the future is a future by reducing fossil fuels, right? And the reliance on fossil fuels, because either way, fossil fuels won't last forever. So we have to come up with another plan. Nuclear power is probably one of those plans, because you can go for solar power, you can go for wind turbines, but of course we can't control the wind, so we can't control how much energy we're going to get. Hydropower, maybe that's an option as well. But nuclear power, you know, I mean, it's generally speaking, if you look, I know you've mentioned the bad stuff. It's expensive to build, the accidents, the production of radioactive waste, the impact on the environment, etc., etc. But I mean, there are the pros as well. I mean, it's cheap. It's stable. It produces low pollution, generally speaking. It's sufficient fuel, you know, availability. It has high energy density. I mean, it really, there's a lot of pluses to it as well.
Look, I'm not disagreeing with you on that end. There were pluses, surely, like with everything. But I'm saying on a balanced conversation, a balanced argument / conversation. But I do feel for ourselves here, generally in the west coast of Ireland here, particularly where I live here, and the area that I represent here in West Donegal here, or myself and my fellow colleagues, there's 37 of us here through Donegal, county councillors that is. I don't feel it would be a go for us here in Donegal, because you talk there about waste and so on. For example, up where you live there in Dublin, you should have great land up around Dublin there, great farming land, arable land, everything else. We would not be in the same position here in Donegal. And what I mean by that is the same position. Our ground depth of soil and that would not be that deep altogether. So in turn then, it's going to cause problems, and you may not have the proper depths in your soil and land for dealing with waste and so on then. and plus the fact that we're all, as I said, we're all so much. A lot of us are now dotted along the coast here, coastline as such. I just feel there's a lot of safety issues over here that may not be a go for Donegal as a whole.
Okay, well, hang on. Let me just go, if I can, to Matthew Donoghue, who's a member of 18 for Zero, who's starting this national conversation. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Yes.
Matthew, talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old, because I know very little about nuclear power, apart from the fact that I know that the downsides, in fairness to Michael and what he's saying, is it's expensive to build. We know about the accidents, of course, in Chernobyl, Fukushima, and many other places around the world over the last 50 years. It produces radioactive waste. So they're the downsides. I understand the upsides, which is cheap, and it's cheap renewable fuel. But really, are we ready for it yet?
So there's a lot of points there that I wouldn't mind addressing. So first off, safety. So like you mentioned Fukushima. So that was a big catastrophe, but it was a big catastrophe because of the tsunami and the earthquake. Nobody died. There was no deaths related to nuclear power or radiation. None at all.
But there was one, but I think that was a rescue service person, wasn't it?
One possible one.
Yeah.
He got lung cancer, but he was also a smoker as well. So
okay, what about Chernobyl? We can't deny that many people ended up with life-changing problems because of Chernobyl.
Those reactor designs, are not in use anymore. So, and also there was gross negligence as well that caused that incident on top of poor reactor designs. So
we don't have a good history here in Ireland for being welcoming when it comes to nuclear power. Carnosaur Point being the optimum. What we talk about, was that 1973 or in around then, when so many people objected to it. And I suppose the waste is the big problem for people. What do we do with the waste?
Well, I disagree with you. Like, I think the attitude of Irish people is kind of changing towards nuclear power. I think it's becoming a lot more positive or accepting that this is a possibility, and it's definitely something we should look at. And the government, I think, needs to conduct a study into nuclear power. Right now, like, a lot of people don't know, nuclear power is actually illegal in Ireland, which is crazy. Like, we can't even have a conversation about it, a study about it, to an in-depth study to see if it would be suitable.
I wasn't aware it's illegal, by the way, but that seems a little bit like nail in the coffin material, isn't it?
Exactly, because no company, any companies that would be interested in conducting a study, or like Eamon Ryan, our Minister for Energy and the Environment, said that nobody has approached him regards to nuclear power, so he hasn't looked at it. But of course, no one's going to approach,
because it's illegal.
Company's going to approach them because it's illegal. Yeah. So we've called on Eamon Ryan to look into this. Our group 18 for Zero. But yeah, we've had very little response from him.
It'll be a long way away. I mean, it takes a long time to build a nuclear power station, doesn't it? It's 10 years.
Along with that, yeah, we'd have to set up a regulatory agency as well. So
and they're expensive. They're expensive to build. I mean, you're looking at 2 to 9 billion, depending on the size of the reactor.
Well, yeah, like for a small modular reactor, like a 300 megawatt reactor, that we'd be looking at, it's about $1 billion. But to transform our energy sector into a low carbon, it's going to be expensive. There's no way around it. But the thing with nuclear power is, so you have a large upfront cost, but then after that, like, the fuel is so dense, so energy dense, it's thousands of times higher than anything else.
And there's a lot less waste, but the waste is more dangerous. Do you understand the point that Councillor Michael McLafferty is making, that it might be all well and good where you have soil where you can bury this waste? Is that normally what you do with the waste? Is bury it deep in the ground?
So I think he's thinking about a deep geological repository. So that's one option that's been looked at by.
But it's not an option for the people of Donegal, according to Michael. I don't know nothing about soil either.
Yeah, so. But it wouldn't be in the soil, so it would be well below the water table. So we're talking maybe a kilometre below underground. So in stable rock formations, in geologically stable rock formations.
I mean, just to come back to Michael. Michael, what's the alternative, really, to be honest with you? Wind power? The difference in nuclear power is we can store it, we can control it, it's stable. Wind power, we rely on the wind. We can't create the wind. So we rely on it being there, and we can't store the energy either. So if we produce too much, we have to get rid of it somewhere and sell it to somebody else. So, Michael, that's not really the answer, is it, going forward?
Well, but sure, I mean, it may not be the answer going forward, as you're saying, but why can we not store our own power? Like, for example, why can we not? It's a bit mad. Like, we've probably one of the windiest countries maybe in the world, possibly. Not sure, but I'm sure we'll be certainly up there in the top 10 for one day end of it anyway, no matter where you live in Ireland or Northern Ireland countries either, or next door neighbours.
Well, certainly Donegal is windy, that's for sure, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a crazy thing, to be quite honest with you. All the windmills we here in Donegal at the moment, and we're not able to store the power. There seems to be no forward thinking at all. No forward thinking at all on the whole thing.
Well, is that not what nuclear power is? Forward thinking. Is nuclear power not forward thinking, Michael? Because we are getting to a point where we're going to have to decide what we do going forward. And I don't think, I mean, when we're talking about sustainable fuel and you want to talk about waste, I watched a video last night of where all these windmills go when they die. And, they're all buried somewhere too. So, and there's a huge amount of cost factor involved in those, maintaining them every 15 years. They have to be replaced every 15 years. There's a massive cost in maintenance in wind farms. So we have to look at all the options.
I know we have, and you're right what you're saying to a point, but the other side of it is as well, just going back to the one farms for a minute and come back then to the other point again that we're on here about the nuclear reactors. The point is here, there's no point creating these things and then not having the end game in place. Like we have one here at the minute, as all through Ireland and Scotland and whatnot and various other countries. But for ourselves here in Ireland alone, they need to be looking at the end game. They should be storing the power. For example, you're saying looking going forward. I am looking going forward. It's madness. All the millions and possibly billions as well have been spent on windmills, and we're at the stage now they cannot store the power. That's madness, like.
But that's just the way electricity works. That's just well, you can store it with capacitors, but to some degree. But that's just the way electricity or batteries. But that's just the way it works. You can't. It's just unaffordable to produce. I'm not an expert on electricity, but I'm assuming I'm assuming you have to have some large batteries, as you would. But we've a huge one here in the rack room at the radio station. It's about 4 foot high. It's about 4 foot wide, and it stores enough electricity for the radio station if the power goes for about 2 hours. And so I don't know, what we do with a wind farm. Maybe, Matthew, you could explain that better to me. Like I'm a 5-year-old. Why can't we store energy from wind farms?
You mentioned it. It's too expensive. I mean, I don't think it'd be even physically possible. Like there are some options, but there is no country in the world that's used wind and solar that's completely powered by wind and solar. Like nobody's been able to achieve it. So what happens typically is we have coal. Like if you look at Germany, they've switched off their nuclear power plants and they've just been replaced with coal and gas.
Yeah. So they're going backwards essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sometimes you see these conversations and they're framed as nuclear versus renewables when it's not. In reality, it's nuclear and renewables. And you can see that in a number of different countries. So say if you take, for instance, Finland or Sweden or France is 70%, over 70% of their electricity comes from nuclear power. So it's definitely it's one of the best options, especially for countries that don't have the correct geology.
How many reactors would we need? How many reactors would we need in Ireland for the whole country?
You wouldn't need a lot. There's a huge amount of power in these reactors, 300 megawatts. So for 18 for 0, we're talking about our name comes from, we want to produce 18% of our electricity from nuclear, so produce zero carbon. So we're only talking about 4, 5 reactors, 300 megawatt reactors. It's not massive.
I mean, Matthew, is the end goal, or should I say, Michael, is the end goal not for everybody? That, the government are targeting towards net zero. By the way, I don't believe that's even an achievable thing. By the way, I think that's a bit of a fairy story. The government's target for net zero. But look, no matter what your beliefs on climate change, and we can have a big row over that tonight if you wanted to, right? I have one theory, but we're not going to get into it tonight. But no matter what your theory happens to be, the fact is we need to move away from fossil fuels eventually because we'll run out of them. So we need to look forward to the future. And, Matthew, I don't know anything about it, but he seems to have done his homework. There's no country in the world has sustained itself on wind power and solar power. Ireland is definitely not going to sustain itself on solar power, that's for sure, judging by the last month. So realistically, we have to look at other options. The only other options, nuclear, hydropower. Maybe we've plenty of water around us, that's an option, but it's not going to sustain the country. So we don't really have options.
Well, no disrespect to Matthew at this point, I'm sure he's very well versed, and he sounds very well versed. And I certainly wouldn't think for 1 minute that he's not, because he's clearly done his homework and his facts and figures, and that's fair enough. But what my concern is here, and I do this to Matthew as well, if a reactor was to come, or reactors, or whatever might he said there a second ago, sorry, it would need it 2 or 3, whatever.
300 megawatts, yeah.
Well, sorry, the megawatts high. But for example, where would they be best placed in Ireland is another question. Where is most suitable for them to work? Where is this, two points? Where is the safest place for them to be set, and where is the most useful place that they could be established, built, for example, that's going to cover the whole country without any issues as such, if all this was to come to pass? Because no matter where they go, where they are built, safety is always going to be number one. And the fact that they're illegal in Ireland, that they are illegal in Ireland at the minute, it's going to take a long time, by the sound of it, for even Ryan or them to come round to talking about it either while they're in power anyway.
Well, no, we can if we really need to, because of course climate is an emergency according to the Green Party. We can change legislation very quickly if we really need to. But okay, Matthew. Ideally, I know where do you put nuclear power stations? Do you put them in a city, or do you put them outside?
That's a very good point. That's what I was going to address now. So a lot of the small modular, the companies that are developing these small modular reactors, and I'd like to come back to waste in a second as well. Just talk a bit more about that. But so they develop them so that they just fit into coal power plants. So they take all the existing infrastructure for coal or turf or whatever we have in Ireland, like any of the carbon emitting sources of energy, and we slot in these small modular reactors.
How big are they? How big are they?
A lot of them are the same output, physical size. Some of them, the reactor core, the reactor vessel can fit in the back of a truck.
You kidding?
So the building around it is a bit different. There's we did mention, so when we're talking about reactor design as well, so there are different reactor designs. So the current nuclear reactors that everybody's kind of familiar with, they're called third generation. So the new ones coming down the track, the fourth generation ones, so they use a different type of thermal reactions, like fast neutron reactors or breeder reactors. So they can actually take the nuclear waste that come off of third generation nuclear reactors and use it as a fuel. So when they burn this waste, or it's called a MOX fuel, in this fourth generation reactor, the byproducts then, they only last for about 200 years, rather than to get the background radiation levels, rather than the thousands of years for the other
old
fuel types. So yeah. So the waste becomes much more manageable.
And you're saying they can you're saying essentially they can recycle the waste from the old nuclear reactors.
Yeah. There's actually there's an interesting company, Maltex. Actually, the CEO of Maltex, Rory O'Sullivan, is an Irish man. And they're developing. So they're based in Canada and the UK. So they're one of these. Malt and salt.
I don't know. I'm like everybody else. I'm kind of obviously cautious around nuclear power because we've never had it. And I'm kind of with Michael on that point, a little bit cautious about it. When I look at the screen in front of me here and I look at nuclear disasters around the world, I am cautious, particularly Chernobyl, of course, the most famous.
But if you look at the death rates per megawatt hour, nuclear is on par with solar and wind. People, when they install wind turbines or solar on the roof, there's always some accidents. So it's the same. It's in around that.
And what percentage of the world's power currently at the moment is nuclear? What of the world's power?
The world's power, I'm not too sure, but for the EU, it's about 25%.
That surprised me. I didn't even think it was that high. Does that surprise you, Michael? That 25% of the EU is nuclear power?
Well, I have to confess, I wasn't aware. So I take Matt's word for it. I wasn't aware of what. I never thought of that, to be quite honest with you. Just as we're talking, it is going through my mind as well. Is there not chat these days, on not even these days, but this last couple of months, about a serious situation out in Ukraine with a nuclear reactor? There's danger of it getting blown up. Like, I mean, if anything happens there, okay. Look, I'm not taking away from Matt's argument.
That's an active war, isn't it? I mean, that's a different
It's
situation.
an active war, but hang on here a second. It's an active war, yes, but the principle is the same. If that thing blows up, where's your safety then? Like, how many thousands of people then? Depending, are we going to have a Chernobyl all over again then? Like, I'm not discrediting what Matt's saying, no one way or the other, but I'm just being realistic here, looking at the facts. And the other fact of the thing is here as well, for ourselves here in Ireland, it's granted what Matt's saying there, fair enough. I appreciate his information and insight into it, because it's news to me as well, and I'm always all ears to listen for anybody has new points of view, and I welcome Matt's conversation tonight very much, as to yourselves on the radio there. But the thing is, my argument will be, and I don't believe I'll be changed on it, if nuclear landed here in Ireland, which it could very well come through time, as Matt is suggesting, and so on. But you need to look at this way realistically, gentlemen. If anything happened to a nuclear power plant here in Ireland in the next 20 years of one, as Bob will say, and all the I's dotted and T's crossed, etc., Ireland has the potential of being wiped out. This is the reality of it. We are a small island. We could be wiped out. And it may not be our generation, but the next generation or the generation after that. And that's why I think a hell of a lot of thinking needs to go into this, and safety and everything else, and really, really thinking about where is the waste going to go. Appreciate the fact that it can be reused again to a certain extent and so on. But in the meantime, until it is reused, where's the best place to be built? Where's the best place for the waste to be stored and saved and put on the ground and so on? Bearing in mind, gentlemen, again, we are surrounded here by water. I don't know about this digging so much on the ground. I worked in quarries for years, and I'll tell you one thing, you're not go down very far on the ground till you start hitting water problems. You go down 50, 100 foot, you'll soon start to get water in most places.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen then? I know these things are built, are normally stored in something, if you like concrete tombs, to be quite honest with you. Such reinforced steel and all the rest. I appreciate that. From the research I've done on that myself, I think I'm not far out of that, Matt. There's that type of situation.
No, you're not. Yeah, dry casks. Yeah. So you're dead right. They are kept in dry casks, and there's a few things there you've talked about now that we kind of I'd like to go through.
Yeah, go ahead.
The reactor designs that we'd be looking at for Ireland, the small modular reactors, like even if it's something like a molten salt reactor like that, like the one I mentioned previously, they work at atmospheric pressures. See what happened in Chernobyl, like that was like, yeah. So it gets complicated. Like when you get
but give me the bottom line. If the reactor, if what happened in Chernobyl happened to one of the reactors you're talking about, okay, let's just say a reactor like that was in Dublin or close to Dublin. Let's say in County Meath, right? And what happened in Chernobyl happened to the reactor. There was a breakdown or a meltdown or whatever they call it, right? What's the worst case scenario with that reactor, the fourth generation reactor you're talking? What's the worst case scenario?
Like the thing is, it can't melt down because it's already molten salt. The fuel is already melted. And the thing with what happened in Chernobyl was, so you have to use a pressurized water reactor. So to take the heat away from the reactor core, you have to see water. No, but what
I'm trying to establish here, and on behalf of Michael and my listeners, is that if you put a nuclear reactor and which are new molten salt and or whatever you call it, the fourth generation reactor. So what's the
it couldn't.
So what's the worst thing that could happen? What's the worst thing that could happen?
Like the contamination wouldn't go any further than the reactor building. Like it's completely safe. Like you're not talking about like aerosols going up in the air or spreading. But even for that, So it's like it's much safer. These are passive systems as well. So like even if the electricity switched off, the coolant switched off in the reactor, like it start getting really hot, there's a plug at the bottom. So once it gets to a certain temperature, that plug melts. So then all the liquid fuel just drains off into a tank below it, and that stops the reaction, that absorbs all the neutrons, and it'll just lay there.
Michael, does that ease your mind a little bit, Michael, to know that we've come a long way? It seems with nuclear reactors. It's not the days of Carnosaur Point, or it's not the days of Sellafield, or the days of Chernobyl, or even worse. That those days are kind of gone. Those old reactors that we've moved on in technology, and worst case scenario, nothing really happens if things go wrong.
I appreciate what Matt's saying there, but I'm not.
You're not convinced.
I can't help. I can't help but thinking here as we're talking at the same time. I'm afraid I have to say this. I don't like saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway. And this is not to do with Matt's example there, but I will give an example here, and I'm being genuinely and up sincere saying this. As I mentioned to Matt there about the underground tanks, the die caskets, or what I think it was he called them. But as you are aware, as you are aware there in Dublin, and obviously you have the same situation yourself in Dublin at the moment as we have here in Donegal and Mayo and Galway and so on, the Maker situation. Imagine if we did have nuclear here and with Maker happened to be in those tanks, storing the stuff on the ground.
Oh, I'll get you.
And the cracks. You know, I'm not.
That'll be two disasters in one. Yeah, we've enough. I suppose the point he's making, and it's a good point. We tend to get things wrong in this country.
But we have to follow.
I appreciate what Matt is saying. Matt's given an excellent explanation there of how things have moved forward. That's fair enough. Everything looks good, and everything looks good in a book or in a video and so on. To be honest with you, it really does. Sometimes it doesn't always go according to plan, and that's the very thing. And look, we have not a great track record in this country, as you said yourself there, of getting things right, to be quite honest with you. And history has taught us that in so many examples and so many ways, and tribunals and scandals and one thing and another. But this may be the way forward. This may be the way forward alongside Hydro, but I don't know. I haven't thought too much on the Hydro, to be honest with you. Although as
I said to you at the start, Michael, the only thing about hydro, solar, and wind power is we have no control over that. We rely on nature for that. We can't control that. I understand that. Yes, where nuclear, coal, and fossil fuels, we can control.
Yes.
Sorry, Matthew.
We can control it. Sorry.
Well, sorry. What you say? We can control it. What?
I'm saying it can be controlled, as they're saying going forward, but can they control if a disaster happens?
Oh, I know from that point of view. But it's yes.
And put in the safety measures and everything else, like Matt says there, and that's all fair enough. But I'm sure when they built Chernobyl and they built Sellafield and one thing and another, they thought they were in control that time as well. But the point is, things still go wrong. And the point is as well, I keep going back to it, and I'm sorry to labour the point, we are a small island if something goes wrong. And this is the reality of it, like. But I think, anyway, going forward, probably the way going forward for Matt and his team and his followers and everything else, and for ourselves, the conversation needs to get opened up properly. The government of today, I don't think they'll engage in the conversation while it's still illegal anyway, to be quite honest with you. And I would say we'll all be sitting on the fence for a long time doing our research and our arguments for and against and so on. But at the end of the day, like it's a big conversation.
Yeah, well, see, Matthew, the problem is, Matthew, I suppose there is a mindset, and I'm going to have a quick look now because I didn't look already, but I did put a tweet up earlier on, and I asked people, should we build nuclear power plants in Ireland? I was in about 20 minutes ago, and there's over 1,200 votes there. 69% said yes, 25% said no, 6% said they're not sure. So it seems people are on your side. Maybe it's a younger generation. That older generation might have a bit more fearful. But, okay, he makes a good point in relation to Ireland in general. We tend to get things wrong quite a lot. And this is not something we can get wrong. But you can't make mistakes with this.
No, 100%. You did not get this 1 millimetre wrong.
We wouldn't be building it. It's not like the Irish government's going to go out there and start building it themselves.
Actually, I thought you'd get Matty McGrath to do it or something. No, sorry.
but they have to. And those companies have to follow strict guidelines set out by the IAEA and whatever national governing body we have, probably the EPA. So it's going to be stringent. Like it's not like they can put in whatever concrete they've found off somebody down the road, something like that. It's not going to be like that. They can't do that. And this argument that I've heard this before. We can't build a children's hospital. How can we build a nuclear reactor? But we're building how many thousands of wind turbines and interconnectors to different countries and gas stations and everything else. We're building constantly. I find that kind of insulting nearly to Irish people to say that we can't do this. Of course we can. We do it all the time. Irish people work in nuclear power everywhere, all around the world, and in lots of different areas as well. And we build stuff all the time. To say we can't do it
And do you think the conversation will happen? The fact that it's illegal, as you pointed out already, do you think the conversation is going to happen? I mean, are the Green Party, of course, are the ones, now I don't know how long more they'll be in power for, but are the Green Party, are they going to even accept a conversation around this? Or what's been the appetite for the conversation?
You can see countries all around, particularly in Europe, they're all starting to change their perspective on nuclear power. So if you look at Sweden, they talked about removing nuclear power. Denmark, which is in a similar situation to us, which it's illegal there as well, but they're opening up their conversation as well. And Germany, I can tell you, watch Germany in the future. They'll turn around. They'll have to go back to nuclear power as well. Like, we all have these commitments. We all moving towards net zero. And the International Energy Agency, they've come out, they've said like that on their roadmap to net zero by 2050, we need to at least double the percentage of nuclear power. So it's like, it will have to happen if we're taking this seriously. If we take this as a real emergency, we have to come up with some carbon-free energy source, and that's
it's not
right
going to,
now,
and that's not going to be wind. No, it's not.
That's not going to be wind, like a baseload energy source anyway. Yeah. But we'll mix. It'll be nuclear and renewables together.
Yeah,
that'll do this.
I do think. Sorry, just very quickly because I'm running out of time. But Michael, I do think that he's right. We're never going to be able to produce enough electricity using wind, using solar, or using hydro. We'll have to build a lot of dams. We're never going to be able to do that. So the only way to achieve what the government want to achieve is by, using a combination of all different types of renewables.
Yeah, he's possibly right, and that may be the way it's going to come to pass. But as we're talking, I'm just curious. I'm going to ask Matt, why did Germany stop using theirs? What was their trail of thought and stop using it when the word? What made them stop it? If we could just get that quickly.
I think it was Fukushima, even though nobody died from radiation exposure in Fukushima. And
yes.
Fukushima occurred because of a magnitude 9-point-something earthquake followed by a tsunami. Germany, almost landlocked country, decided to stop using nuclear on those grounds. It doesn't really make much sense to me, but they.
It was by the way, it was a very bad time for them, just when they had their gas cut off to be getting rid of their.
It was
a really bad time,
and it was always going to go back to coal and gas, once they got rid of nuclear, because you need that baseload power. Like when the wind stops blowing at night, you can't switch everything off. I mean,
we just all go asleep.
Nuclear waste. Just one other point that nuclear waste. Nobody has ever died from nuclear waste. Nobody. I mean, so it's not dangerous. It's very manageable. Like, we can keep it in dry casks for a number of years until it cools down, and then they can move it to like a deep geological repository. That's one option. So that's underground, below the water table, in a geologically stable area, or they can reprocess it like they do in France.
I know you said nobody has died. I know you said nobody's died from nuclear waste, but have people got ill from it? Have people had radiation poisoning from it?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
And when you say it cools down, so how long does it have to be buried under the ground for it to cool down?
I think you just kind of leave it there and
forget about it. Okay. So
it's thousands of years. Yeah.
So people are 20 generations from now, they'll discover it. Right. Okay.
But I've heard this argument as well. But 20 generations, if we're we have a crisis now. Like, climate change is a crisis now, not possibly digging up some dry casks in whatever thousands of years. We have to deal with the problem now.
All right, but listen, on that note, okay, I'm going to have to wrap it up, lads, but it's a really interesting conversation. Matthew, thank you very much indeed for explaining that to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And Michael, thank you very much. And Michael, I hope, listening to Matthew, maybe in other conversations, we can all have a decent debate about it without all shouting at each other.
Of course, at the end of the day, respectfully and all around. Yeah. That's all it's about. But
Yeah.
at the same time, just respectfully get our views out there. And obviously, we may not agree all the time, but that doesn't matter. You respectfully take each other's points on board, and and that's how it's going to go. And at the end of the day, whether the government like it or not, this government or the next 20 governments, unless they sit down and agree, they don't have to agree all the time, obviously, but unless they sit down and at least listen to other opposition point of views respectfully, as I say, nothing's going to change otherwise unless you do that. And it doesn't matter what argument you have, you still have to come back to the table and sit down and talk about it. No matter if you hate whatever's going on, you may not like what's going on, you may hate it, but we all need to realise, including myself, you can't get your own way all the time.
Absolutely.
And you have to be respectful to the
And
opposition.
I think the main thing for the people of Ireland, would be the safety of people is paramount.
110%. It's
Okay.
the safety. I'm sure Matt is that. It's top
I'm sure he believes the same thing. Yep.
Top of mine is top of yours, and that's all matters. All we want is safety paramount, and just for the future generations of today and tomorrow, and whatever generation comes along, that they can live happily and peacefully, and that's all we want. And good health to everybody, and that's all I can say on it.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Michael McLafferty, and also Matthew Donoghue, who is a member of 18 to 0.
Real people, real opinions, Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.